Something we haven't done enough, nearly enough, I don't think, is really explore how big the ships are. And I know this is something you want to speak to. We're talking about something that is almost 1,000 feet long. And when you hear things like it's traveling by close to 10 miles an hour, it doesn't sound like that's that fast. You should be able to slow it down. Could you give us a better framework to think about the size of these ships and the kind of forces involved?
Absolutely. I mean, people have to think these are huge structures. Tens of thousands of tons that travel. The momentum for these structures to stop could take 10, 15 minutes for the moment you lose propulsion. So people, when they see the ship hitting the bridge, the engines have stopped way before, minutes before. It's not easy to really stop this at a moment's notice, like we're used to, with our car, for example. The other thing is obviously when this happened, a lot of the procedures were followed the right way. I mean, the ship through the anchor, for example, tried to slow down the momentum, right? They tried to route away from the pilot. But it is not something, I think it's more of the timing. The timing was really bad when this blackout happened. If it had happened like a few minutes later or before, this wouldn't have happened.
As an observer, from the outside looking in, when you see the lights go off, come back on, go off, come back on, and black smoke starts to come out of the back, what was it that you thought was going on at that point?
Well, I think what people are doing in the bridge, trying to figure out what the situation is, right? They see suddenly things are not responding the way they should. Probably the emergency generators or the emergency systems didn't work, or they weren't, they were malfunctioning. I mean, I'm pretty sure there was a lot of attending to solve the situation, and they did the right thing, right? They called the authority and they said, you have to stop the cars, right? So they did the things that they should have done. Probably, we don't know exactly what the situation was, but that's what we would imagine. But there's not really an easy solution. It's a timing more than actually what happened. I mean, a lot of ships get under these conditions, but you never hear about it because it's not in a bridge or in an area that affects anything. So it's not unheard of, but it's a timing.
When we talk about risk controls, some have postulated that maybe this is a result of dirty fuel. Does that ring true to you? Is there sort of a theory that you see as something that's more common for some of these malfunctions in the past that could be at the heart here?
So contaminated fuel could be the reason, and it's something that you hear in the shipping industry. I'm pretty sure that it's an easy way to find out. You can test the fuel. And I'm pretty sure that the investigators will find that. But yes, that could be one of the reasons. One
economic consequence people have been talking about is that even a 10% increase in capacity in flow to New Jersey, New York, Virginia ports will cause the same kind of backlogs that we saw during the pandemic. How concerned are you about that kind of additional traffic will cause ships to have to wait out in the harbor to get unloaded and to get sufficient dock workers to get it all done?
So the good thing is that we're in a slow shipping period, right? We're not in the Christmas period or pre-Christmas period. Right now is a slow shipping period, especially for consumer goods. So that's a positive. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the 10% sounds not a big number, but if the ports of New Jersey or down to Norfolk, Charleston, Savannah are already close to capacity, that can really create a situation there. And I think that's something that you cannot really gauge, you cannot really measure. Also, probably the West Coast can take some of the cargo and then rail it to the East Coast. That definitely increases prices. And that's part of, I think, the effects you might feel on the consumer side. But I don't think that is as... in terms of size, it's not going to be anything close to the pandemic, right? We're not talking about anything like that. But keep in mind, this comes on top of what's happening in the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal. So this is not like an isolated incident, because if it goes by itself, then it's not a big deal. But you have the Suez Canal, all the divergence around Africa, and then you have the Panama Canal, where you don't have enough water for the ships to transit, at least not to the rate that they used to.
This ship was built in Korea. We hear a ton of protectionist policies and rhetoric coming from Biden and Trump ahead of November. You don't hear it about shipbuilding. The U.S. doesn't make ships anymore.
Well, they do, but it's 3 times more expensive. So it's not, I think it's a cost issue. It's not really, you don't do that. And you cannot compete in a protected economy in the shipping industry in the U.S. So that has been going for decades in the U.S. and everybody either complains or try to protect the industry, depending where you are. But I don't think that's an issue. I mean, Korea builds very high-quality ships. This is a new ship, high-quality built ship. It was maintained well. I mean, it's not really something that I think the focus should be in.
Given all your experience in this space, what do you think the timeline is for the cleanup and the rebuild?
So If you go back like 20, 30 years ago, a similar incident happened down in Florida. It took 7 years to rebuild the bridge. When you talk about that, I'm not a structural engineer, but that's something to think about. Reopening the port, my personal view is that it's going to take months. People talk about a few weeks, but if you see, everybody can see the structure and how much steel is in the water. Think about the salvage operations. How are you going to build this? How are you going to bring these barges and cranes to take all this steel out of the water? And then, of course, to salvage the actual ship, take the containers that were broken in the water, the cars. So I think it's going to be, longer than what most people think.
You've been an investor and analyst for more than 2 decades, I believe, 20 plus years. I'm trying to understand where the liability might sit. How are you thinking about that at the moment? The president's come out and talked about using federal funds to rebuild all of this. But as you think about who might be responsible for this, where would the liability sit and where would the insurance be?
If you take the whole cost of this, is running to multiple billions. I don't think there's going to be anywhere close to that for whoever was responsible on the shipping side. Obviously, the P&I clubs will get involved. I think it's a much more complicated situation than just an accident, a shipping accident, because it's very rare that a shipping accident affects actually ordinary citizens or a structure that is standing there idle. So if 2 ships collide, then it's very simple. It's not simple, but it's easier to understand where the liability stands. Here you have like a sitting structure and a ship hitting this structure. So it's totally different. I think a lot of different parties get involved on the shipping side, but also on the actual, commercial side, call it.